Most corrupt countries in the world. Number 1. Somalia. Somalia is ranked as one of the most corrupt countries in the world by Transparency International, with a score of 9 out of 100 on their Corruption Perception Index. The country has been racked by civil war and lawlessness for more than 25 years, and corruption has become entrenched in the government, military, and business sectors. High-level politicians, government officials, and influential private individuals have been implicated in embezzlement, bribery, and kickbacks that have resulted in the diversion of millions of dollars in public funds. Looting and misappropriation of public resources by government officials are also widespread. The lack of a functioning government and a strong rule of law has made it easy for criminal networks to operate with impunity, fueling the corruption further. Number 2. Afghanistan. Afghanistan is consistently ranked as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. According to Transparency International's 2020 Corruption Perceptions Index, Afghanistan ranked as the third most corrupt country out of 180 countries scored. The country is plagued by widespread bribery and extortion, and public resources are regularly abused and misused by those in power. As of 2021, Afghanistan also faces a significant challenge posed by organized crime, much of which is driven by the trade of narcotics. In addition, there is a general lack of transparency in Afghanistan's government and public institutions, which makes it easy for corrupt officials to go undetected. The country's weak legal and judicial systems do little to hold accountable those who commit acts of corruption, which further emboldens this kind of behavior. Number 3. Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Corruption has been an issue in Nigeria for decades, but it has become increasingly prevalent in recent years. Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index ranks Nigeria as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, alongside countries like Somalia, South Sudan, and Yemen. In Nigeria, corruption is found at all levels of society, from government officials to private citizens. It is particularly evident in the public sector, where bribery, nepotism, and cronyism are rampant. This corruption has led to mismanagement of public funds, resulting in poor economic growth and limited access to public services. Additionally, it has enabled high levels of inequality, with a large number of the country's population living in poverty. To address this corruption, the Nigerian government has implemented various reforms, including creating a national anti-corruption body and introducing tougher laws. However, progress has been slow and much work remains to be done. Number 4. Ukraine. Ukraine is considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world, according to Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. The country's ranking of 130 out of 180 countries in 2019 marks a slight improvement from previous years, but corruption is still rampant. Ukraine suffers from a pervasive culture of bribery and graft, and the country's poor track record in terms of public procurement and asset disclosure makes it a target for misuse of public funds. Political interference in law enforcement and the justice system has been a major obstacle to tackling corruption, and the lack of public trust in state institutions is a major concern. Additionally, public sector workers often lack the resources to do their jobs effectively, making it easier for corrupt actors to operate with impunity. The government has taken steps to tackle corruption, but much more needs to be done in order to improve the country's standing. Number 5. Venezuela. Venezuela is widely considered to be one of the most corrupt countries in the world. The 2019 Corruption Perceptions Index ranked Venezuela 162 out of 180 countries on the corruption scale, with a score of 16 out of 100. Corruption has been rampant for years in Venezuela and is one of the major factors contributing to the country's current economic crisis. A lack of transparency in public institutions, an inefficient judiciary, and a lack of accountability are all part of the problem. In addition, Venezuela's government has been accused of using corruption to maintain its grip on power. In 2017, Transparency International found that more than 80% of Venezuelans had participated in acts of corruption, with bribes and payoffs to government officials being very common in the country. Number 6. Ecuador. Ecuador is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, according to the Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI. The CPI ranks countries on a scale from 0, very corrupt, to 100, very clean. In 2021, Ecuador received a score of 28 out of 100, indicating a high level of corruption. Ecuador has the second lowest score in South America and is ranked 108th out of 180 countries on the CPI. The levels of corruption in Ecuador are high due to weak government institutions and a lack of transparency in the public sector. Bribery, embezzlement and fraud are common in many areas of public life, including the judiciary, public contracts and the electoral process. There have also been reports of political interference in the media, especially during election periods. The government of Ecuador has implemented anti-corruption laws in recent years, but these have not been effective in reducing levels of corruption. The country's citizens remain dissatisfied with the level of corruption in the country, and there have been demonstrations in the streets against it. The government is continuing to strive for greater levels of transparency, but progress is slow. Number 7. Honduras. Honduras is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, as measured by its score on the Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI. The CPI is an index created by Transparency International to measure the perceived level of corruption in a country, with a score of 0 being the most corrupt and 100 being the least corrupt. In 2020, Honduras received a score of 28 out of 100, placing it 126th out of 180 countries. Honduras has long been plagued by corruption, particularly in the political sphere. In recent years, the Honduran government has been accused of malfeasance, misappropriation of funds, and even complicity in human rights violations. The country has seen a spike in organized crime and drug trafficking, leading to a breakdown of trust in the government. The situation in Honduras has been compounded by a culture of impunity, with many government officials and politicians facing little to no consequence for their actions. The lack of accountability has allowed corruption to thrive, with government funds being diverted to personal gain. In addition, the country's weak judicial system makes it difficult to investigate and prosecute corrupt individuals and organizations. The government of Honduras has taken some steps to combat corruption, including implementing anti-corruption laws and creating an anti-corruption agency. However, these measures have had limited success in curbing corruption. Until real, meaningful action is taken to address the root causes of corruption in Honduras, the country is likely to remain one of the most corrupt in the world. Number 8. Brazil. Brazil is a country located in South America and is home to the world's 5th largest population. Unfortunately, Brazil is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Its public sector, from the highest levels of government down to the everyday services, is riddled with corruption and bribery. The government and its institutions are fraught with scandals and criminal activity, from political corruption to money laundering to human trafficking. This has caused the country to experience an economic downturn, with the economy being further weakened by high levels of poverty and inequality, and a lack of access to basic services and resources. Brazil is ranked as one of the worst countries in the world when it comes to corruption, and it is estimated that as much as 1/5 of the country's GDP is lost due to corruption. The government has taken steps to combat the problem, but the country still has a long way to go before it can be considered free of corruption. Number 9. Mexico. Mexico has been plagued by endemic corruption for decades. The country has struggled to establish a functioning government for many years due to corruption, which has a deeply rooted history in Mexican politics. Since the end of the Mexican Revolution, the country has experienced a long period of authoritarian rule, which has enabled corrupt practices to become entrenched within the government and across all levels and branches of the public sector. This has led to a lack of accountability and transparency, and an environment where those in power use their positions to obtain personal gain. The prevalence of corruption in Mexico is further exacerbated by the lack of a strong judicial system and access to justice, as well as weak enforcement of laws and regulations. This has resulted in a culture of impunity and weakened public trust in government institutions, making it harder to tackle corruption. Furthermore, organized crime and drug trafficking have been major sources of corruption in Mexico, with cartels and gangs infiltrating government institutions and using their influence to further their own agendas. This has resulted in a deep-seated culture of corruption, which has undermined the country's economic and social development. Number 10. Armenia. Armenia is widely considered to be one of the most corrupt countries in the world. According to the 2019 Corruption Perception Index, CPI, by Transparency International, Armenia ranks 111 out of 180 countries, with a score of 37 out of 100, indicating that corruption is a serious problem in the country. In particular, the Armenian government is widely perceived to be corrupt, and the country's legal and judicial system has been identified as a particularly weak point in its anti-corruption efforts. Reports from the World Bank also indicate that bribery and extortion are widespread in Armenia. Additionally, nepotism and patronage networks play a major role in the country's politics, with politically connected individuals often receiving preferential treatment. These networks are said to be the main drivers of corruption in the country. Thanks for watching today's video about the most corrupt countries in the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more curious facts and stories from around the globe. We upload new videos every Tuesday, so make sure to come back and join us. See you soon.